Upbringing of Children, compiled by Moulana Moosa Ibn Ahmed Olgar, is a generally good book on its subject, but some of its ideas seem to be cultural. Some of them seem to be sourced from the Sufis, and in general, that's okay, but there's question about a couple of those things from an Islamic standpoint. The prophetic example, the prophetic teachings, what has been revealed, of course, is heavily referenced in this book. Calling chapter 20 Tawiz is a problem in itself, although that word may mean differently in some languages versus others. But there's a difference between writing down a prayer and wearing the prayer and that sort of stuff, and actually just saying the prayer or having something that you can read off of. There's a difference between an amulet and a talisman, you could say. So if a talisman is something that completes the ritual, you have something and you read off of it, okay. But if you just have some Quran verse or prophetic supplication hanging in your car, for example, and you don't read it, what is it, a decoration? Do you think it has power in itself? Either of those things can result in some issues, right? Surah 104, 112, 113, 114, ayat 97 and 98 of Surah 23, part of a verse from Surah 5, supplications for pain, crying, cure, chapter 36 to teach your kids, and the commentary for those supplications seems sound, as does everything that's directly attributed to Prophet Muhammad. 19, well, there's some issues of the authenticity of what's mentioned in chapter 19, because the ritual genital mutilation wasn't explicitly taught by the Prophet, and it seems to be condemned in certain verses in Surah 3 and 30 and some other teachings of the Prophet. The childhood ceremonies, again, there was no specific teaching about circumcision as part of that, but that was usually done among Semites. So, that was picked up as such. And the ages and that sort of thing that this happens in some cultures, it's not consistent throughout the Muslim majority world. So there's a whole bunch of reasons to think that there's some issues with that. The thing about the natural things, it's not natural to pull out your armpit hair or anything like that. And so there were discussions after Muhammad died about grooming. I mean grooming as in like doing your hair and trimming your nails and that sort of stuff. Like people have different opinions on, how long should you go without trimming your beard and your mustache and all that other stuff. These were discussions after Muhammad died. It wasn't that Muhammad himself said it. And there's narrations that pretty much prove it that end up in some of the same chapters. The concluding chapter makes some extremely important points about the purpose of life and the merit of, particularly for the parents. You do have other things that can relate to family. And your legacy, of course. Of course, raising a good child. It doesn't mean you can't raise a child to be physically strong and skilled, um, mentally strong and skilled, etc., etc. What can be said to be a preface in terms of what's just translated without the actual Arabic is also very good too. You want to look directly at the examples that are in Scripture of the prophets and their family. It is very important that we use our authority appropriately. People having children isn't just so they can live out the dreams that they personally were not able to live out. They're going to have their own personalities and abilities and all that. They're going to have their own circumstances that they come across. What matters is how we use our control over situations and individuals. And one of the things that we come across is, well, you look back in the day, there was abortion. There's been abortion since the start of recorded history in different forms. So that's not really the, well, I guess we'll get to that a little bit later here. But one thing that's becoming legal in my country is infanticide. And people who accepted Islam were worried about their past. And see, the thing is, if they've truly accepted Islam, that past is wiped clean and they shouldn't worry about that. But they should understand how grave of a thing it was. I saw this thing, I think it was at the Democratic National Convention. This woman was talking about how she's had 2 to 4 abortions a year for her whole adult life. And I think by adult life, we mean that when she was a teenager, too. Obviously, people actually tend to break down emotionally, kill their heart, as Aleister Crowley calls it. That's what happens when people get older. It's not quite, oh, well, they could become more responsible, but typically they don't. They typically, oh, you just feel guilty because you're immature. It's like, no, you feel guilty because you still have a heart. Well, people always have a heart, but you know what I mean. You know the phrase. Without all the examples, it's important to know that Islam has spiritual guidance for every aspect of life. And you don't always have to know a specific formula. Like if you know Surah 2, Ayat 255, or the first chapter of the Quran, or the last 3, or, some other, Surah 36, some other formulas, you can basically just apply them to pretty much anything, right? But there are certain verses and supplications that are more relevant for certain situations. And so fasting and some other efforts, if they're going to hurt the mother or the fetus, she's not supposed to do them. If she's not pregnant, that can also be the same thing too. It's important to pay attention to what the mother has while she's breastfeeding, what she has when she's, when she's pregnant, what she's paying attention to media-wise. Even before birth, a child should be hearing scripture. And breastfeeding is something that mothers are rewarded for. They shouldn't worry about, if they're not wearing too tight or revealing clothing in the first place. That's not really going to serve a problem too much. And as far as what people think is ideal looking or whatever, and if they have a husband, again, the husband can adapt to the changes in his wife. the the cord and that sort of stuff, it's not supposed to be disposed of through burning or some disgusting means like a sewer or whatever. That they can just be buried anywhere with care. You don't need to set a separate grave and mark it and all that stuff. The rules for a mother and child that die together are basically the same. If a woman dies in childbirth or right after or whatever. So it's important to know the criteria of, about the funerals and stuff. Now, it's good to say the names of God in general, but, and it may make sense, the names of God that they chose, of saying when you're pregnant, but these practices aren't exactly prophetic, and I would, point out that, it may not be the proper usage, saying this name 100 times, this name 100 times. Just read the Quran, read something where it comes up or something. That's going to be better for you. Because remember, the Quran is the best of remembrance. It's the chief. Certain supplications and verses that can be said during certain stages of the child are important to consider. One thing you're going to want to do is when a child's born, you help it get a full bath, and you you don't dunk the child like some of these priests or something, but you help the child get a full bath, and you give it you let it hear the call to prayer, both the adhan and the aqama, and you give it chewed up, or the parent, there wouldn't be any issue with that if it's the parent doing it. Or if it's not going to be chewed food, then, obviously blended food, initial food's going to be that. Some substitutes may be had for breastfeeding if the mother's not able to do that for some reason. Some say to trim the toenails right to left and left to right hand, then left hand, and then the thumbs. I'm not sure about the last part. If you teach your children religious things when they're young, it's going to be easier for them. Instead of filling their heads with nonsense and fiction, you kind of give them something to build up towards. Get them used to modest clothes and other factors, rather than just saying, oh, now it's totally required. No, get them used to it before it's required. Teach them religious manners. Teach them that life is not about declaring your position, or being stubborn, or mere decoration or entertainment. Sure, they can have joy in life, but perhaps they'll have more if they're trained towards their purpose. Regard safety, of course, but perhaps silver and gold isn't the thing to have kids play with. Teeth and bones of, animals that it's acceptable to do such with, remains of animal slaughter and stuff like that that's been cleaned, might be a better thing. Does it get their mind in the idea that, death happens? And some of the stories, as examples, are not of the Prophet, and that's fine, and I can't think of anything of those stories that, isn't fitting enough. But let us understand that when it comes to other than Prophet Muhammad, We can take or leave anybody's opinion, and we can kind of, we need to be more careful about the circumstance. It's like, okay, if that's not right for us, it may have been right for them. Some children do very amazing deeds in their life.